Welcome everyone to the Picture a Scientist panel. We're very excited that you're all here. And I am going to introduce Jean Hassenlopp to everybody who will get us started today.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jean Hassenlopp, and I'd like to welcome you to this event that's co-sponsored by the Marquette Advance program and the Klingler College of Arts and Sciences. Advance is a network of universities that are committed to transforming themselves to promote equity in faculty lives with a particular focus on how gender intersects with other identities. I think one of the things that's really important to note is there are lots of ways our identities impact our workplace experience. And today we're going to hear a little bit about this, but we also need to acknowledge the fact that gender is not a binary and that we have other perspectives that we are looking forward to exploring in the future. I also like to say that advanced programs support all of the areas that NSF support, which includes the STEM disciplines, the traditional science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as well as the social, behavioral, and economic sciences that are part of the National Science Foundation. And the goal is ultimately to support all of our faculty. And so I'm looking forward to our conversation today, and I'm going to hand it off to my friend Heidi Bostick, who is the brand new Dean of the Klingler College of Arts and Sciences.
Thanks, Jean. Thanks, everyone. I want to thank Renee Hill, who's our organizer for today's session. We're really excited to have been able to bring the screening of Picture a Scientist here to Marquette and to host this panel discussion this afternoon, which we are recording. I know that we do have some colleagues across campus who had conflicts or are able to be here, so hopefully they can watch later and learn from the insights of our panelists. I'm particularly delighted to introduce our panel today. And what I'll do is briefly introduce them. I'll get us started with some initial questions. And I'm sure that many of you watching have your own questions. So please submit those using the Q&A box. And Renee will keep us on track to make sure that we get to as many of your questions as possible. So first we have Dr. Jie Wang, who's an associate professor of chemistry at Marquette, recently tenured in 2019. She received her PhD from Emory University. And her interests in biomimetic, photosynthetic, and photovoltaic materials led her then to do postdoc research at the Argonne National Laboratory. Her group focuses on the development of cutting-edge materials for various chemical reactions and applications in sustainable energy sources. And the research program in her research group is funded by NSF as well as the Department of Energy. Our next panelist is Dr. Anita Manogaran, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Biological Sciences here at Marquette. She received her PhD at Marquette and then worked as a postdoc fellow at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Her research focuses on understanding the cellular mechanisms underlying protein misfolding disorders, including Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Manogaran credits her success in science to persistence and to strong women mentors. And finally, we have Dr. Allison Murray, who's an assistant professor of mechanical engineering in Marquette's Opus College of Engineering. Like me, she received her PhD at Purdue University. She worked in mechanical engineering and finished her PhD in 2019. Her research focuses on additive manufacturing with a specific interest in dynamic characterization methods for 3D printed components. And she also investigates broadening the participation of underrepresented groups in engineering education. So to the panelists, let me get kicked off with a general question. And what I'll do is direct each question to one of you, and you can always pass it off to somebody else. But my first question, maybe let's start with you, Dr. Wang. What are your kind of initial thoughts about the film? Did you have any kind of preliminary reactions or responses?
Yes, I do. So after I watched this film, the first reaction I have is, wow, this is an important film that we need to watch, and it is right timing to have it. So although I was exposed to this type of issues before from various sources, like news from internet, workshops for the conferences that I have gone to, but I didn't pay as much as attention after I watched this film. The main reason that I didn't pay too much attention was that myself and the people I know, particularly the women scientists, I know that we didn't experience the similar issues. But by looking at the film, I believe these issues do exist, and some women scientists unfortunately experience this unpleasant gender-related bias toward women. For example, the sexual harassment issue in the film. When I saw this in the film, it was terrible. So since these issues do exist, it is very important to have such a film which can help to draw the attention from society, such that more efforts can be put into to solve these problems. So I believe science needs diversity. So in order to encourage more women to pursue science career, it is essential to address these issues. So this film is really helpful.
Fantastic, thank you. And how about you, Dr. Manogaran? What were your initial kind of reactions or thoughts about the film?
Yeah, it was one of those things that you view and you're horrified at the same time, but these things exist. The one that resonated, I think, the most strongly with me is this iceberg concept, where blatant harassment and sexism is only kind of the tip of the iceberg, but so much of what women experience in science is the stuff that's underneath, and it's just these daily kind of microaggressions and things that happen either in the classroom, in interacting at conferences, that really kind of add up to how women feel about how they're treated in science. So that iceberg really resonated.
Thank you. And how about you, Dr. Murray? Initial kind of reactions, thoughts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that the iceberg analogy that's presented is really key. And for me, I look at this film and I see all of these women that came before us. And I know many female scientists that look toward the women who came before them and are thankful for the kind of the glass ceilings that they've broken, but know we have a lot of work to go on to. And I think one of the key points of the iceberg that kind of resonated with me is, all of us start new roles, or our students who are entering college, or maybe our graduate students, and we all have this bit of imposter syndrome to ourselves, right? We wonder, are we just here? Were we fooling someone? How did we get here, right? And I think women get a little bit more of that because we have these conversations where, oh, you were just a diversity hire, or, oh, you just got that scholarship for undergrad because they needed another woman in your program. And so to overcome those extra imposter syndrome and other underlying kind of mental energy that women have to play with, I think is something that the film really pointed out and resonated with me in making sure that we don't spend too much of our extra energy that maybe our male colleagues don't have to spend on these issues.
Thank you so much. And something I've heard from a few colleagues across campus who are not in the sciences or in engineering have said that this kind of issue applies to every field, every discipline. So it crosses, it's a problem in STEM and it's a problem beyond too. And that point that you raised, Allison, is a very good one. How much extra effort is spent by folks who are subjected to this kind of mistreatment and this kind of inappropriate behavior that they could instead be using in their teaching or their research or living a good life or doing other kinds of work. So, maybe we could turn to a little bit more to a question about each of the pathway that each of you has taken to get where you are today. And one of the things I love about working with students is that oftentimes our path is a little more serendipitous than they may have thought. They may look to us and think that we had a linear path from A to B to get to today. So maybe each of you could talk a little bit about what helped you along the way, what obstacles you had to overcome, kind of just a quick summary of that path you've taken. And so, Jir, why don't we go back to you and see if you have anything to offer on that question?
Sure. So for my personal experience, I think that the answer is quite simple. I think it really depends on my interests. So once my interest is set, then I think the path is quite straightforward for me. So let me give you an example. So why I choose chemistry as my major. I just like equations, and the chemistry deals with a lot of equations. It's filled with just equations, and it becomes more interesting to me when I notice that what I learned from book, like the atoms, molecules, these are tiny particles. I can really use chemistry tools to study them. So that's a very exciting thing to do. So that's my that's my interest. So once my interests are there, then it's quite simple. Now I have passion. I'm excited about doing these things. So I will work hard for it. So then after that, I think my pathway is straightforward. So I went to college for chemistry major in a graduate school for PhD degree in chemistry, and then did postdoc research to gain more experience. Then after that, I joined Marquette as a faculty member.
Great, dear. Thank you. Wonderful. Appreciate it. How about you, Anita? How would you characterize how you got to where you are today?
So a lot like Jir, I was attracted to biology because, biology is a puzzle. And so it's like the ultimate puzzle, trying to solve it. And so it was very attractive because it's, you run an experiment, you solve the experiment, or you get the data and try to figure out what the answers are. And so that was very driving for me. And very early on as an undergraduate, as I was doing undergraduate research, I had a graduate student that was my mentor. And she really went out of her way to tell me things that she encountered along the way. And the one thing that she said is mentorship is key. Having good mentors that are going to guide you, think about your benefit, but also give you a little tough love to make sure that you know exactly what you're up against. And that was really good advice. So at every step of the game, I went and sought out mentors, and these weren't just female mentors, they were female and men mentors. And, it was really important. What she said is to have a network of people that you can depend on, because if something happens, you have a network in place. And if you don't have that network and something happens, then you have to immediately search for helpers. And I thought that was really, really great advice. So for me, it was really having mentors that are really thinking about my success.
That's great. I love that concept of having almost a team. And it's something that I've done some work around design thinking and helping students in a class called Designing a Good Life. And we talk about how design is not a solitary endeavor, it's a team endeavor. So the same thing with life experiences and with navigating your career path. Right. How about you, Allison? What would you say about how you've gotten to where you are today?
I think a similar thing in my life is the mentorship role. So I took a very kind of linear path from undergraduate to graduate school. And I did, in anticipation of this question, I did a quick look back at my transcript. And I took 50 classes throughout all of my degrees. And I had 3 female instructors over those 50 classes. And so something that really shaped me was kind of on that mentorship thread of, I had female mentors that I could look up to and could kind of give me that perception of what am I getting myself into and share their experiences. But I really had to rely on some really strong male allies, and having those people who can be your champion and can fight for you and your direction, and they're on the inside. And I think that's a piece of this conversation that we have to remember, that we can have these conversations and share our experiences, but we also need help from people who don't identify as women in the STEM field as well as other fields.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, and I have found that mentors are important at every step of the way. First as a student, and then in starting your career, and I have a network of mentors also. And the interesting thing is, a lot of them probably don't use that term to describe themselves. And just a note to the students who are watching today, it's not always necessary to go to somebody and say, hey, do you want to be my mentor? Because many people are sort of modest and they think, well, I'm not wise enough to be a mentor. But you can simply go to somebody and say, hey, I have this situation I'm facing. Could I, in confidence, share it with you and just get some advice? So sometimes it's better to just ask people for advice. They're your mentor, even if they don't really embrace that term. Let me just ask a follow-up question, and maybe any of you who wants to answer, you can just kind of raise your hand and then we'll spotlight you here. because I don't want to just keep going down the row in order. But did any of you ever get any feedback about, oh, you know, when you were a girl or a young woman, like, oh, how interesting that you're going into this field. Isn't that kind of unusual or anything like that? I'm just curious whether you had any kind of questions about that, about, oh, why are you interested in that field?
I'm happy to field that question initially. So I'm a mechanical engineer, and I can't remember the statistics for very recently, but in 2018, 15% of mechanical engineering PhDs were given to women. And so it's a pretty male-dominated field. And so I felt very often questioned when I was a tour guide in undergrad by prospective students, why would you want to be an engineer? When I would interview for jobs, why would you want to be an engineer? When I looked at grad school, and I found that my male colleagues weren't necessarily being asked those questions, but what I did find was that I was able to have a really kind of good story to tell and explain, you know, I enjoy the maths and the sciences, and it's not that crazy for a woman to want to be an engineer and all these things. And now the people maybe who are entering engineering now, they can look to some really, really strong female engineers and no longer have to maybe answer that question nearly as often as some of us that came before them. But I think it's a common question, and you find your canned answer to it and smile through it sometimes.
Great. Anita or Jir, anything to add?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jir.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, no one, I didn't like have someone from scientific field to ask me this question, but I did have someone ask me this question: why do you choose chemistry, particularly physical chemistry? My major is in physical chemistry, so that's actually my physician. So the first time I met my physician, so he asked me, so what's your major? What do you do? So I told him I'm a chemist. And then he asked, which chemistry, organic chemistry or whatever. I told him physical chemistry. So he questioned why, as a woman, why do you feel like a physical chemistry? It's too difficult. So he's very he's scared of physical chemistry. He doesn't like physical chemistry at all. So my answer is similar. I told him I like math, I like equations. So physical chemistry deals with equations more than other divisions in chemistry.
Yeah, Anita?
So mine's a little bit different. So I had two amazing parents that were my cheerleaders, and you know, it didn't even occur to me that this was an issue until I got to college. So, you know, I kind of went through, yeah, I took biology classes and I did well in math, and my parents were like, yes, yep, that's what you're expected to do. You're doing great in science, just keep going. And so I was really buffered by the realities of what's going on in science until I got to probably my first biochem class. And I was probably one of maybe 4 girls in a class of maybe, I don't know, 45 or something in biochemistry. And then I'm thinking, well, this is a little strange. And, you know, all the girls sat in the back and all the boys were in the front. And, you know, and all of a sudden you don't realize it. But as you go further along, you realize, well, wait a second, there's less of us. And then that's when the doubt comes in. And so for me, you know, there was no one ever telling me I couldn't do it. It was more of, oh, wait, this is not what I conjured up in my head. So that was quite shocking by the time I got to grad school. You know, I was the only female in my cohort that was taking biochemistry classes and those type of things. So, you know, you tend to kind of live a life of hard knocks as you start going through, and you kind of learn kind of how to navigate it. And we tend to be clumsy in the beginning, but hopefully with time and mentorship, we can get better at it.
Thank you. Yeah, let me make one follow-up comment, but first let me say that we're having some glitches with the Q&A function here. So if folks have questions they'd like us to pose to the panelists, just go ahead and email those to Renee Hill, and I'll spell her name for you. It's RENEE .hill, HILL, @marquette.edu. So go ahead and just email the questions if you're having any challenges with the Q&A. So Anita, back to your point about the women sitting in the back. So a true story I heard from a colleague at another university. Many of the, I think it was deans, many of them were men, a few of them were women. This particular colleague was a woman. She was filling in for her female dean one day, and she showed up to the room where the folks would always have their meetings. And it was a big conference room with a conference table, but didn't have enough seats for everybody. So there was a ring of chairs around the periphery. all of the men sat at the table and all of the women would sit along the wall. I mean, this is recent. This is not ancient history. And so this colleague of mine just thought, I'm going to find myself a nice seat at this table. And so she sort of broke the gender barrier of the meeting. But it's just an illustration of how it's not only among students, it's today, it's all these things. And just the symbolism of that the men belong at the central table and then the women need to sit off to the side. So what advice would you give? We have a question about this. What advice would you give for aspiring early career young scientists? What might help just starting out scientists, male, female, or otherwise, succeed? And let's maybe mix up the ordering here a little bit so Jir doesn't feel like she's getting asked to go first every time. Let's switch the order maybe and start with Allison this time. So what advice would you give to a young, just starting out scientist or engineer?
Certainly. So I think something that's important is perseverance as you kind of go through all of these challenges and all these extra things, but also passion, because it's really hard to find the will to persevere through these hurdles and these barriers and things if you don't have the passion for what you're working on. And I think our young scientists right now are really going to have to solve the next generation of problems. I think things like climate change and clean water and all these issues that are coming up right now are going to be the responsibility of some of our younger scientists, and to engage with the leaders in their other communities, engaging with the leaders in communications and business and finding a solution to these pathways. And so to have that passion and the perseverance to get through the schoolwork so you can be at the table, to show up and work hard so that the next round of decisions and the next round of solutions are made by a more diverse and inclusive group of people is important.
Thank you. So Jir, what would you say? What kind of advice would you give to a just starting scientist?
So again, I would like to link this question to my personal experience. I think it's very important to not self-doubt yourself. Be confident. So even if you fail, it's okay. Failure doesn't mean that you cannot do it. You just need to put more effort to it, just get to work and try again. And you will be surprised that if you put your fears away, you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. So I think also do not afraid to ask